All right. Greetings, everybody. This is Marguerite Rigoglioso of Seven Sisters Mystery School. And I am here today in what I think is probably going to be the first in a series of conversations I'm going to be having with sister priestesses to mine them for their information and guidance on what's happening in this time of opportunity, this time of danger plus opportunity equals crisis. So my first guest here is Dawn DelVecchio. And some of you may be recently aware of her, that she is the mastermind behind the return of the Priestess Summit that is currently going on as we are filming here in April 2020. I became really intrigued by Dawn and instantly respectful of her energy when she was interviewing me for the series, and how she's handled the creation and the execution of her series with such integrity. And I wanted to go back for more, and I wanted to put the spotlight on her a little bit because she's been putting the spotlight on so many other women, and we need to hear a little bit more from her. What I do know is that she's a longtime priestess. She's got academic degrees. She's an author. She's a workshop leader. She's an astrologer, a world traveler. She lives in multiple places, including Sedona, Arizona. So welcome, Dawn.
Thank you, Marguerite. It's so nice to be here with you. I really appreciate this. And it's fun to reconnect with you again, too.
Yeah, good. So why don't you give me the 5-minute university on Dawn DelVecchio? Like, who are you as a sacred woman, and also tell us a little bit about your academic background along with that.
Okay, great. So let's see. My first spiritual experience was before first grade, when I was so excited to find out about the life of Jesus. And I was very disappointed on the first day of catechism. It wasn't exactly what I was hoping for. So I began a spiritual journey that was a rebellion a little against the Catholic Church. And eventually what happened was, when I was a pretty young teenager, I did explore psychedelics. And then I got pregnant very young. Not at the same time, but in that sort of period.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Connecticut, USA.
Oh.
Yeah, East Coast girl.
Okay.
And so I had my son at home. I actually learned about alternative health and birth. That was the beginning of my sort of awakening to health and well-being and natural living. And so I had my son at home with midwives, and they introduced me to other women who were having home births at the time. 6 of us started a mother support group. That my little bit of a joke that's not actually very far from the truth is, we started out as a mother support group to begin to talk about diaper rash and things like that, and, baby stuff, and became a coven of witches dancing naked under the moon.
Of course, one thing leads to the other naturally.
So the Mother Peace Tarot deck and the accompanying book were the beginnings of our initiation, as well as the work of Starhawk, Z Budapest, Diana Marie Child, and many others. Simultaneously, I was beginning my undergraduate degree, which I ended up receiving a degree in women's studies and English, with a focus on feminist literary criticism. So very academic, very feminist. This was a time when my feminist professors who wanted to get tenure, they didn't want to hear the goddess word. That was not going to happen. We were busy reclaiming the word witch and goddess as empowered feminine energies. Priestess wasn't really in the lexicon yet. We weren't really using priestess. But when we initiated ourselves into the coven of Mother Spirit, the 6 of us, we called ourselves priestesses of that. But it wasn't a word as much as witch. We were really like reclaiming, witch. So what happened after that was, I actually so here I am. My son is about 6 years old, and I graduated, and I needed to make a move, and I moved to the American Southwest, to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Met a man and who became my first husband, and I dove deep into the warrior world. So I became a martial artist. I'm a certified, would be considered a master teacher in the art of Muay Thai, which is a ring fighting sport, very hard.
Whoa, I'm trying to envision this. Okay, I'm getting the picture of your ancient Amazon lives.
Yeah,
For
very
sure.
much, very much.
In Africa. Yeah.
Yeah, like so from the soft feminine mother, as my son was bigger and and I've always been an athlete. I used to be a synchronized swimmer for many years. So the athleticism of it was very easy for me. I ultimately ended up training a lot of women and men to step in the ring. And there were moments where I taught skills that I knew I had never learned.
Oh boy.
Yeah, they just came through my body. So I have I'm blessed with a body that can memorize things easily and coordinate. And I'm grateful for that. Also been a dancer, not professionally, but just on my own through my life. So I did that for 12 years. And I had 36 ring fights of my own, 6 broken noses. It was I was definitely working out some completions of this energy. And then I had a dark night of the soul, and it broke my heart to teach the arts of war. But I had this gym, and I had hundreds of students, and I had this mantle of responsibility. It was our income. So at the same time, we began walking in the woods, my now ex-husband and I, and really deeply falling in love with Mother Earth. And so I went through 3 years. I felt very much like Persephone, who plucked the black narcissus and got immediately plummeted into the underworld. It was a Pluto transit for any of the astrologers out there. It was the Pluto square. So came out the other side of that, moved over to Southeast Asia, left my husband, left everything. I literally had to cut ties. I had an enemy in my camp, psychologically, not physically. And started my life over as a writer and became a writer. And I've been a professional writer for many years.
Tell us about some of the things that you've written.
I was a travel journalist. That was my dream. I wanted to be able to travel, and I had no money. So I became a travel writer.
So great.
So I did that for a long time in Southeast Asia. And then I came back here. I got some coaching to build a business. And I wrote a book called Spirit, Mind, and Money, a new conversation about service and success for holistic business owners. And it was really about the money wound I was carrying and how many spiritual people struggle with this theme. And that was an Amazon #1 bestseller back in 2015.
Wow.
Yeah. Since then, I'm also I'm a marketing copywriter in the holistic and spiritual space. So when you see things online for classes or programs, not all of them obviously, but those are the kinds of things I write.
Yes.
And emails, things like that. So every piece of writing you see through Return of the Priestess it's mine and only mine. I wrote it. But the goddess has been with me all along. Even in the martial years, I would gather my female students and we would have these like tarot circles or full moon events. Not often, but we would have them. And then I don't know if it's still 5 minutes, but I wanted to kind of catch up to the re-initiation for me.
Let's do that, because where did you really sink into your esoteric life as a priestess, so to speak? I mean, it sounds like a little bit here, a little bit there with the tarot, with the groups, but yeah, let's hear about that.
So the esoteric life really was back then with Mother Spirit, but what wasn't there was the personal development and the inner shadow work. That started to come more when I began to build a business, and deeply in 2016 when I went and I presented at a conference in Bali, which is one of those other places that I spend a lot of time. And it was a women's conference, and that was an activation for many of us. And that was when I realized that there were all these women walking around as priestesses, and this was my secret hidden thing that I thought that was just my little thing. And that was, I really felt like that was my call to really do a lot of healing work, some blocks to leadership, blocks to shining my light. I dove deep into A Course in Miracles. That came in at some point. A lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, devotion. Basically, my devotional practice came on in a big way, and more shadow work, more inner work. I worked with some of the speakers on this series are women who have facilitated my healing and transformation so that I could stand and lead. So I hope that answers your question. I mean, obviously there's more details, right?
It absolutely does. And so now that everybody has a sense of who you are a little bit, let's get into it. And we'll talk about your summit toward the end. So, and for people, we're providing a link that they can check it out, register, it's free, and so forth. It's going on until May 7th, something like that. May
3rd.
May 3rd, okay. So it's chock full with these discussions and these experiential exercises that people are giving. Really wonderful, a wonderful diverse group. And a lot of people I am not familiar with, which is always great. So let's get to today, because I think the value for people in these conversations is, what are sacred women who have spent years, decades, training for this now moment, essentially saying about this now moment? Where are we what's it about? Where are we going? What is your take? Like, when you first started hearing about what was going on in China, and then the inevitable was coming, and maybe it's even beforehand, did you have premonitions, this and that? What is your take as an esoteric priestess on what is going on here?
Yeah. Okay, let me connect in so that I get really direct to the essence, because there's a lot that one could say.
Yeah.
I would say in some way there was always a seed of knowing that the early awakening I had as a young mother in Mother Spirit, that there was a purpose that would be unfolded in many years to come. September 11th was the key, the beginning, the clues, like, things aren't what they look like here. Still no clue what my role could potentially be. Fast forward to what started unfolding this winter. And meantime, I had been studying some of the things that are behind the scenes, what we could call the secret governments or the secret control. So I'm very well researched in the potentialities of what's going on behind what we would see in the mainstream.
Yes.
My deep, and we can go there, but I want to touch on the spiritual, like, let's get from not in the battlefield, but the overview now, the sacred overview. We are midwifing a new earth. We are at the nadir, the imam koli, the bottom of what we would call, what the Hindus call the Kali Yuga, the age of great darkness. It is the time when the most corrupt are in power. And yet it is the dawning of a new age. And we are legion, millions around the planet, not just those who are what would we call them, the whistleblowers or the fighting against, but those who are holding the light. We have worked deeply for a long time to clarify our minds of the obstructions to love's presence, to become vessels of light in order to anchor light and love at this time, in order to not be triggered by the shenanigans of other people's egos, the projections of others, and to actually be in service with our skill sets, whatever they are, when the real revelations begin to come and people are more in shock.
And I just want to point out the synchronicity of your name. You're Dawn of the Old. That's what your name means, Dawn of the Old. Yes. DelVecchio means of the old, of the ancient ones. So I feel that you're bringing in that ancient future knowledge.
Thank you. I am full of tingles.
Yeah.
I can feel my guides here with me. So.
Yeah. right? You know, I mean, we have to, as we are entering into fifth dimensional consciousness, we are shown through signs, wordplay, name synchronicities, event synchronicities. We have to be paying attention because we're given the information. It will resonate with us on deeply intuitional levels as we open the consciousness more and more and more. So that's like a case in point with your name.
Thank you.
So yeah, okay. So yeah, this is the overview. Let's dig in a little bit for those, in terms of those revelations. What do you think they're going to be? What is your intuition telling you? What are your meditations, your dream space events telling you about this?
Let me just go in here. There is fear. The word fear is coming up. There's consciousness pockets, like there's the mainstream consciousness, and they will be the ones that, if revelations come of the truth of what's going on, some of which is very dark, the pedophilia, the abuses of power on every level, there's going to be a lot of denial and cognitive dissonance among the people. And I feel it's very important for those of us who are, it's what we have to do is we have to see the dark plan. And I get this also from Magenta Pixie, of one of the many people I follow. See the dark plan, integrate all of our feelings about it as they arise, the fear, the disgust, the anxiety, the worry about the future, the money, the survival issues, all of it. Like, it's like a process. And then declare our sovereignty. This is really important, that we hold the sovereignty and we move through these so that we really can be more stable as some of the ones who really are still believing the narrative begin to see how dark and ugly it is. Now, how that will actually unfold, I'm really not sure, but my feeling is it's not going to be a big sudden reveal where all of a sudden, this is what some people I think are hoping, is that we're going to see somebody come on the news and tell us this is what's really been happening. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think some of it is not yet for us to see as well. My feeling is just that I have to really be so connected with my guides and with my knowingness of the eternal nature of my being, and with love, that whatever poop hits the fan, I and so many of us can hold that stable ground of love and light.
Excellent. I have been having, similar thoughts, feelings, revelations, and I really like Magenta Pixie's rubric of seeing what is on that interdimensional level, feeling the feelings, declaring your sovereignty around it, and then being in the love space around it. And then I added yesterday at the Soul Pod forum that I've started with women who are on the esoterics and are able to kind of hold the negative and the positive with it. And they want a forum for talking about what they're seeing on the negative side. The next step is then visioning. Okay, visioning the new earth, right? So that's kind of, a 4-part. I think that one of the things I'd like to run by you is, what's your experience of the phenomenon of multiple realities and timelines going on right now, perhaps vying for the earth? Like, there's a game for which timeline and which reality going to pull everything together. Is it the revelation timeline, or is it the biowarfare timeline? Is it the everything, this is just naturally what happens, Mother Earth thing? Is, what Can you speak to that at all
Hmm.
from your intuitive perspective?
Yeah. My feeling is that we are on the what you could call the Ascension Timeline, and it is trying to be hijacked. Now, why do I, and again, this is something that Magenta Pixie says, but here's why I agree with it. Because we know we're at the nadir of the Kali Yuga. We know the gig is up for the dark forces. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not in for a rough road ahead.
Yeah.
I feel that we are.
Yeah.
I also feel there's timeline bleed through from other times, either on this planet or others, where we weren't able to lock in the Ascension Timeline. Some refer to Atlantis. I can't say for sure. I know that right now in my dreams lately, and for a while on and off, I feel like I've been doing great work with others, not alone, to navigate some kind of interdimensional. I don't really want to say battle because it's not like pachoo pachoo pachoo. It's not that. It's an energetic anchoring.
Yeah.
My feeling is that we have the light workers on the planet right now, but I'm not sure if it's a but or an and. We have to keep doing our inner work. It is so easy to get hooked and go down the little spiral path of low frequency. And so it's not like we just get to kick back now and go, yeah, we got this. It's a daily discipline to offer up our negative thoughts, our fearful thoughts, to what I call Holy Mother Spirit Sophia, the Holy Spirit. It's a daily practice to be mindful of what we're thinking when we don't even know we're thinking, so that we maintain a high frequency. And there's one piece I want to add to this. This doesn't mean spiritual bypass to go, I don't want to look at that stuff. We have to feel the feelings. So when the fear comes up, it's like, well, sometimes we have to create the space to go through that. It's more like when we start niggling or picking at, like when you pick at a scab, it's like you're going to keep going over it and over it. At some point, you got to go. Whether it's a burning ceremony, a surrendering, a devotional practice, it's like, okay, I've processed these feelings. I don't want to keep thinking hateful thoughts towards such and such. Let it go. Offer it up.
Great. How do you feel that your shadow work is helping you at this time? How is what's going on related to personal and collective shadow?
Yeah. Well, that's two questions. So my shadow work helps me to return to the light, to what I would say, clear out the obstructions to love's presence so that I'm more of a vessel to hold more light. And I use this, remind me if I missed that second part because it's important, but I want to answer this. I did a video about a year ago, and I put a bunch of dirt in the bottom of a jar and filled it with water, and I let it sit for a day. So all the dirt was at the bottom. And then I went on and I talked about this being a metaphor for what's inside of us. And then when we have a lot of old material, old wounds, etc., it can sit real still. But with the frequencies of Mother Earth increasing and the light activations from the sun and the central sun, it's getting all stirred up. So all of a sudden it's really cloudy. So we have to clear out. We have to do, for me, it was a lot about leadership in the last year. Before that, it was a lot about money wounds. So really digging in and looking at, where am I triggered? As soon as I get triggered, instead of going, well, she this or they that or whatever, no, what am I being called to look at within myself? It's
Yeah.
a non-dual perspective.
Yeah.
So I think that answers that part. Now, what was the second part?
Yeah. And it was about how the shadow is manifesting in the culture. So the first part was, how is your personal shadow work helping you manage this time? Secondly, what's emerging in the culture? It feels like there's both personal and cultural collective work to be done here.
Yes.
So speak to that.
Yeah. So first of all, what we see when we see what's behind the narratives, the veneer, that the governments of the world are out for our best interest, blah, blah, blah. What we see is a manifestation of humanity giving up its sovereign rights to self-determination, to a big brother, to a big daddy government, to whatever. Abdication is the word that I use. Abdication to the medical system, abdication to the teachers, abdication to the politicians, etc. So we're seeing on large what has happened. Now, this has been long developed over countless centuries through trauma and torture and all of that stuff. So on the collective level, we have to begin to reclaim our own rights, which means we have to look at our own shit, excuse me.
Right.
And we have to do things.
And that's where the toilet paper comes in. We've been saying this.
Yeah, that's where the
Why
toilet.
everybody is so obsessed with toilet paper, because they might have to deal with their own shit.
Yes. Yeah. And they don't want to, the complaints about whether, we're here in the United States. So it's like complain about the president, and then complain that the president isn't doing anything. And I'm not about advocating for that's not my point. It's that mainstream consciousness is indoctrinated into externalizing all personal responsibility. All. We can go into vaccines, we can go into many things. Here, give my kid shots, I'll trust you. Even though we know that the vaccines that the kids are getting nowadays is nothing like what we got when we were little. Nothing. There's a complete loss of mind of the understanding of immunity. So this is just one area where it's like, here, I believe you. I'm not taking any responsibility for my life. And I'm going to complain if I don't get enough, if I don't work hard. I have a job, but I'm not getting a raise. All of this stuff. So there's a level of personal responsibility and personal ownership for our own lives that is not being taken by most of humanity. And that has been conditioned in. So I'm not saying, they're all a bunch of whatever. It's been conditioned in over a long period of time.
Yeah. So then when we have, one thing that I find is interesting is the protesting about the social control. What I had recently heard through the grapevine, because I'm staying off media, is that the particular types of people who were doing this, that the beliefs are not exactly people that I would be in agreement with. But I'm finding a strange bedfellow resolution of opposites where I'm agreeing with some people that I never would have agreed with before. Does it feel to you like there's a paradox game going on, or a unification of opposites now? These flips and reversals that are going on? Speak to this.
Yeah. The first thing that arises for me is that one of the ways we are kept out of we allow ourselves to be kept out of our own personal sovereignty is to confuse our capacity to discern. Simplifying things as black and white, the good guys, the bad guys, that ain't what's going on at all. We know that there have been infiltrations into peaceful protests to create violence, for example. Right. We know that we've had seemingly good guy national leaders who have eroded all personal rights and civil liberties, and yet been painted in a certain way. The gender divide, all kinds of things. So yeah, there's paradoxes. And yes, I too am finding myself a long time questioning the narrative, but actually going deeper and going, wow, like, what I thought I was aligned with for years, liberal politics, is actually, that might have been what it was once upon a time, but that ain't what it is anymore.
Yeah.
It's the hijack of the narrative and the twisting of things so that people are just so confused.
So confused.
The minutia. So you have this is a diversion tactic. You have an issue. Here's the issue, right? And then you'll get the talking heads who will divert you from the actual issue into picking apart the minutia that's irrelevant. And this is why you can have people go, yeah, I think we should bomb that country. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
so we should kill women and innocent women and children because of some minutia argument that you've been so sidetracked that you can't even see the forest for the trees anymore.
Right.
This is part of the hijacking of the consciousness of humanity and the abdication of our own willingness to discern and to think.
Right. 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 And so what I find is that if any sort of counter mainstream ideas are put out there, there's an immediate hostile response, either from loved ones or, you know, on social media platforms and things like that. And I just find that interesting and disturbing. And I'm even aware of like a little threat energy, even as I'm bringing this up for conversation. And we could go deeper and deeper into our views or opinions about what's happening and go even further out on those limbs, you know. But I'm aware of these memes that are like, don't say that, don't think that, don't promote that. You could get into trouble. You could get into trouble. So it's like these persecution energies are sort of afloat. If not now, later, you know, depending on how this timeline plays out, right? Any comments on that?
Yeah, there's two ways we can go here. One is the whole persecution, which I dubbed BATS syndrome, burned at the stake syndrome.
Yes.
And that's shining our light and then being killed for it. That's being in service and being killed for it. That's a little bit tangential to what you're talking about, but I would say that we have to think about this for a moment. When we start to, when people are deeply entrenched in their beliefs, like let's say they're deeply entrenched, and we'll just say it, being a liberal Democrat, and you believe the party line and the narrative, there's a level of, you could almost say shame, but it's not shame. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's something else. Embarrassment. I think embarrassment is the word. If you were to find out how much that has been twisted, distorted, manipulated, and it's not what the narrative is.
Mm-hmm.
And so people and the ego is at play here. The ego wants to keep us alive, and the ego can't discern between the tiger at the door and the person attacking your character and your belief system. So if you have been for decades believing in the Democrats, Republicans, and whatever it is, you know, again, American here, so we're using that, but just insert your, you know, whatever that is, the paradigm in your nation, your culture, and you find out that it's not anything like what it maybe was when you initially did that, and you've had the wool pull over your eyes for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that's embarrassing. And the ego sees that as a threat to your identity. So the counterattack, for those who don't have the tools to look within, can be vicious, because the ego is vicious. And for me, I feel like this, I don't need to red pill anyone. I don't need to to force what I'm seeing and what countless of us are seeing now on the planet on anyone. Everyone wakes up in their time, politically and spiritually. It's not our job to force truth down people's throats. It's our job to hold the light and be compassionate about where they're at.
Yeah, what I've been finding is that I've been getting the message that there literally are multiple realities. So some people are in, you know, very mainstream literal realities. Some people are in realities that we're talking about. To even call one awakening over the other, I'm being shown, you know, just hold everyone in neutrality, knowing that you're going through your journey based on the soul lessons you need. They'll go through their journey. No, you do not need to recruit them, force a red pill on them for them to see anything. I'm just finding that I'm putting out the call to people who are already have taken the red pill, you know, and are exploring these alternative narratives, realities, views of what's happening. And then we are talking from that perspective. I'm curious to know how and when those realities might converge, or whether one's going to pull the other, you know. And again, I think what you're saying is we just don't know.
We
Yeah.
don't know, and we have to do our timeline, which is the timeline of a future that's safe and loving for all, for the children and the 7 generations ahead, and
Yeah.
hold that light.
Yeah, because I think that, you know, whether there's disagreement about whether we should be under lockdown, whether we shouldn't be under lockdown, what's the Venn diagram almond where it all intersects? Everybody wants the well-being for people. They want people to be free and healthy, and, you know, people just see those in different ways. And
Yeah.
the people who are protesting the lockdown, it's not like they're deliberately trying to create more, you know, more ill health. They're just saying, wait, you know, I see something serious going on here. Should we be considering this view as well as that view? Like, what are the most important values here? What are the most important values here? And, you know, of course, the side that's in the mainstream narrative has the value of life and death.
Yes.
Right. So they're like, how could you be worried about, you know, whether you're going to have the right to go to a store or not go to a store when people are dying, right? You know, so there's that kind of, and so let's talk a little bit about the fear of death that's going on here, or the specter of death that's going on here. What are you seeing as a priestess from your perspective?
The specter of death. Well, I love that, the specter of death.
Talk about shadowy.
Yeah. There's 2 things that I really feel are important to say here. First is that, again, when we're in the mainstream consciousness, what we're getting is a distorted narrative, because we know, those of us who are not in the mainstream know, that some of the doctors and some of the opinions of the actual deadliness of this are being completely silenced.
Yes.
So now let's just say all we see is a filter that tells us this is deadly, extremely deadly. It can ruin, it can destroy the whole world. Then you add to that the highest value for many mainstream people is to stay alive, because their religious beliefs is, or maybe their non-religious beliefs, say that this is all it is this. That is a specter, all right. That is a mighty specter. That's a very scary, that's, you know, the sickle with the black hood, you know,
Right.
The death card, you know. Very different than those of us who are, I'm an eternal being. This is one act in a play of eternity. This, in fact, when I drop this form called Dawn, I expand. I don't contract. And there's more adventures for me to have, and the love expands more because the ego is shed.
Right.
And I'm researching to hear the doctors, the epidemiologists, the microbiologists who are saying this is not what they're telling you on mainstream. This is not deadly in that way.
Yeah.
So again, this is 2 totally different realities. There's one other thing I want to say here. Earlier, I mentioned that thing, like, here's the situation, and then they take it's a diversion tactic. It's almost, I think, what you call like gaslighting. And then people will say, you want to go shopping when people are dying? That is a hijacking entirely of the narrative, and then exaggerating it, blowing it up out of such proportion that people become crazed.
They become crazed. I have seen people get into extreme upset.
Yeah.
Extreme responses. And I'm thinking, what is really real here? What is really true? Like, people have allowed themselves to get so triggered, and then they're in trauma response, and then there really is no clear thinking at all. So it's like these pots keep getting stirred, you know, at every which way. Like you're saying, by every little hijack, it triggers a whole bunch of people about a whole of, you know, topics and areas of trauma that they have buried within them or even on the surface from this or other lives.
Yes, yes, let's not even, yeah, this is important to address as well, that they're triggered not just in their fear of death per se, but on many levels. And, you know, as a professional writer of many years, and someone who's trained in neurolinguistic programming and languaging, I can just look at something on the mainstream, and you know, there's so many choices, particularly in the English language, of how we can phrase the same thing. Make no mistake that what's in the mainstream is very strategic. It's obvious to someone who's really a wordsmith and works with words all the time that these are triggering words, that they are constructing the narrative to evoke the most amount of fight or flight, fear, panic, attack toward others, hatefulness toward others. And again, this is something that's not just new for this pandemic.
No.
This is something that's been rolled out over decades.
Yes, they call it sensationalism because it stimulates the senses. This goes back to decades and decades ago, maybe even the last century when that word started coming out, sensationalism. So let's though talk about another layer, which is everything, a lot of what we're talking about gets labeled conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Part of it is because how could you be saying that millions of people who are in the journalistic industry or in the healthcare industry or are fomenting a conspiracy that they're somehow agreeing to? I'll share what I'm thinking about this and what I've received, and let's see if it corresponds with what you've got. The people in the minion worker level, even at the mid-management level, are already programmed into this. So they know how to use those words by osmosis, by training. They've learned what gets tenure, what doesn't get tenure. They've seen what gets attention, what doesn't, what gets a promotion, what doesn't, what gets admiring looks, what gets, you might get the can types of looks, okay? So everybody's already kind of programmed into this in terms of the norms, what's acceptable, what's expected. How I see it is there are higher levels of management all the way going up to the interdimensional beings that are connected with these things that are the actual ones who are pulling the strings, making the decisions consciously that then others just sort of follow along in line with. That is how you explain how a whole population could be involved in a conspiracy. Do you know what I mean? Does this correspond with what you're seeing?
Very much so. And I mean, I just want to point out that the vast majority of people in what we would call mainstream or consensus consciousness are not necessarily self-reflective. They're not self-aware. They're operating based on conditioning, based on incarnational patterning, based on trauma from early childhood or not, or just the patterning. So they're not self-reflective. So if they, let's say a child, you know, a young girl or a young boy, they're like, I want to be a newscaster growing up because they had some impression of a newscaster when they were a child or whatever. They're going to go through the ranks to rise up. Nowadays, and maybe it's always been this way, they are dictated as to what they can produce. So journalism has been deeply hijacked. Citizen journalists are digging for the truth because anyone who's in whatever the mainstream media systems, newspapers, news, all of that stuff, they're not permitted anymore to actually do investigative reporting.
Okay. That's it, because Lynn McTaggart put out an email a couple of weeks ago basically saying, where's the investigative journalism? Are they asleep at the wheel? I think they've been clubbed over the head and drugged, you know, through this programming and through this implied, you do not cross this line, professional, control mechanisms. And therefore, it becomes very, very dangerous for people. to speak at all. I mean, I just feel like there's danger for what we're saying, let alone somebody in a profession of that nature.
Yeah, and at the higher levels, the big players at the top of these media industries, or maybe not at the top, but because there's only 6 at the top, but then come down a layer. Many of them are probably blackmailed as well.
Exactly. And this is where we get into the whole, every once in a while, something will poke through, like the church scandal of the pedophilia, or the Fox News scandal with the girls, being sex objected into their seats on, national television, whatever. So, these things have been going on subterranean levels. Okay. And it's all a part of it. This is how the pedophilia issue is related. There've been many, many people who've said that they are part of these organizations. As children, they were treated this way and that way. They're used this way and that way, Washington pages, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, anyway, let me get back to seeing if you have comment on that.
Well, yeah, this is a deep, dark rabbit hole we can keep going down.
It is.
I think again, this comes back to, well, I guess the one thing I'd like to say is this idea of conspiracy theory.
Yes.
That was invented by the CIA in the the JFK, I think, so the 60s, in order to dismiss anyone who was questioning the dominant narrative.
Yes.
And this is bringing me to a quote by Gandhi, who says, "First they ignore you, then they make fun of you, then they fight you, and then you win."
We hope.
We hope. So, but again,
okay. So in order for that fight not to become a fight to the death, because I can feel all my past life warrior things. I went out there, boom, right? I can just feel it right now. How we're doing this Groundhog Day do-over now is we're not going to just go into the warring oppositional energy.
No.
We're going to go into that neutrality first, and then the love energy, or perhaps other way around. So we have to be able to see, and then we have to be able to transition, and we have to be able to be that warrior of love.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that in this day and age, because there's also, been the dangers around that. Like, well, Jesus, look what happened. I mean, he was loving, boom. So we get all these trauma pictures every time we look at trying to influence a timeline. Okay, influence a reality. So the new love, what does this look like?
Yeah, I want to come into this piece of the conversation. I want to say, in terms of like the battle, those who are in the third dimensional reality, in these lower frequencies, they literally cannot see all that we do when we elevate ourselves, when we clear ourselves and bring in the light and come up to fifth dimensional consciousness. They can only see light. This is my strongest belief. So they can't rise up to see what we're doing and do one step ahead and all of this stuff. We literally are bringing in light of the new age. It's not about a battle anymore.
Right.
Jesus was a forebearer to seed certain information. And it is my deep belief that he did not die on the cross. Yes. That whole sacrifice thing is a narrative they spun to keep us down low, frequency,
I agree.
Fear, guilt. He left his body because he was a master. Yeah. He mastered. It was his last incarnation. Yes. He came to seed for us now.
Yeah. And I think it was Blessed Mother Mary's last incarnation as well. And she went into her ascension.
Yeah, I feel them here. Excuse me.
Okay, yeah. So I think that part of it has to do with calling on these masters for help and always saying this are better for the greatest good of all, because we could be wrong or off or whatever, and we're in the specifics of what we're asking for, meaning well, but like, let's align with greatest good. And, you know, assuming that these energies, these beings are in 99.9, if not 100% alignment with greatest good, and that they can help us in this regard. But really coming back to love again and again, because even their images have been used and distorted for different things, warfare and so forth, right? So like coming back to the authentic love energy grounded in the earth.
Grounded and the high frequency of love as frequency. So it's not, ooh, I love you, or baby, ooh, I love you. Yes, there's that. That's a way to activate the feeling. But this is about divine love. It is about the recognition of the true oneness of our being. We are all one in the divine. We're having these individuated experiences made stronger, separation in the body with the ego. But when we really align with the divine, when we say God first, goddess first, master teachers, come be with me, and then do things like when there are group collective meditations around the planet. This is powerful. This is what I'm talking about. The dark forces can't see. When we're all around the planet meditating for envisioning the future we want for our children, for ourselves, clean, safe earth, etc., that is more powerful than all of their tactics and strategies and manipulations.
I think that is the beautiful culminating place to conclude, and just segue into mentioning your Priestess Summit again. Maybe you can just briefly tell us about this Return to the Priestess Summit and what people can expect if they're going to join in with this.
Yes, thank you. So the Return of the Priestess is a phrase that dropped in when I was sitting at my altar one day last summer. And I immediately went and bought the domain names because that's what one does in this day and age. And it just sat. And then I became aware that I got a very strong message that part of my evolutionary growth as a soul, this is astrological info, is to shine my own light and to stop hiding out in other people's groups. And I knew what I needed to do was call the priestesses to order.
Great.
And so that's what that was. This is a free online series. I've interviewed 29 incredible, extraordinary women. We have diversity of culture, of age, of lineage. And then I'm the 30th. So I'm also interviewed by one of the priestesses. So there's 30 of us. It has taken off like I could not have imagined. We have thousands of women registered. We have this extraordinary Facebook page of engagement. We have many women who have chosen to purchase the series so that they have access to it. I kept the price low. And because 50% is going to a charity that I have personally vetted. And I'm thrilled to say that at this point, and it's still growing, I am going to be able to donate more than $6,000 to this charity in a developing country. That will make a huge difference to refugee children and mothers. Wow. So it's way beyond what I imagined. And now I call it a global feminine activation because that is what's happening.
Win, win, win all around. So under this video, wherever this is going to be posted, is that link for how people can find out about it and register for it. So we will do that. And do you have a personal webpage that you'd like to draw people's attention to at this time? Or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you want to check out some of the ways that I work with women, you can go to DawnDelVecchio.com.
Okay, wonderful. Dawn, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Marguerite.
We're at the hour here. Yeah, this has been great. Thank you for being so forthright and sharing. And we will be in touch. Many, many blessings to you. And we really call upon the energies of these masters to help us be in alignment and to help anything of value that is for others to come through. And for anything that is out of alignment with highest good to just be automatically corrected in the hearts and minds of those who will be watching as well as ours. All right. So thank you so much, my dear.
Thank you.
Right. Bye for now.
Bye.